Hi everyone, my name's Debs and I'm really excited to be here today to talk to you about what it means to stay connected to our hometown in the age of the internet. We'll be looking at some stats, some stories, and I'll be sharing some tips on the topic. Now for us to look into this, we need to establish two things. Number one, what do I mean when I say connected? And number two, what do I mean when I say hometown? And it's actually with the latter that I would like to start. I hope you're all excited for some audience participation, because what I'd love to do now is see by a show of hands who here would consider Chigwell or the surrounding area their hometown. Okay, we've got about a quarter of the room putting their hands up. Okay, thank you, hands down. Now, of those who put their hands up, who has always considered Chigwell or the surrounding area their hometown? Okay, slightly less. Cool. Thank you. It's great to see some local faces in the room today. Question for everyone again this time. Who here would consider the town where they spent their formative years, so where they went to secondary school or primary school, to be their hometown? Hands up. Okay, interesting, about 2/3 of the room there. So the reason I did that is to demonstrate that for different people, hometown can mean different things. And there's something to be said for an adopted hometown, although I'm not going to be focusing on that today. The definition of hometown I'm going to be relying on today is a town or city that a person is from, especially the one where they were born or lived while they were young. So with that in mind, some stats. 31% of people in the UK lived in their hometown as of 2017. That number increased to 55% of people who lived within 15 miles of their hometown. Now, it's worth noting that as of 2019, 40% of people said that they wouldn't be able to afford to buy a property in their hometown, which I'm not necessarily going to touch on a lot today, but do want to acknowledge there's a factor in what we're discussing. Now, because of this topic being quite unique to the local area, I did actually do a survey where I collected responses on this topic. And what I found is that for Chigwell and the local area specifically, so surrounding towns, it's actually 55% of people who lived in their hometown. And this isn't necessarily surprising, given our location in London and the South East, being key economic areas within the UK. In fact, a government report found that living in these areas was akin to living in an escalator region because of the economic opportunities here, which is often a driver for people who live their hometowns in other areas of the UK. The report also had two other findings which I wanted to call out today. Number one, as of 2020, 1.9 million households in the UK do not have access to internet. And one of the findings of the report is if they wanted to encourage more people to stay in their hometown, a fast and reliable internet connection could have an impact, especially with our move towards flexible working. Number two, social connection to a hometown was a prime reason for why people did stay in their hometowns and not necessarily move for economic reasons, with those who did move for economic reasons not necessarily seeing a better quality of life, especially when it comes to social connection. Which brings us to connection, and the two definitions I'm going to be relying on today is connection as a noun of relation, so the state of being related to or relating to someone or something else, and connection as a noun of feeling, a feeling that you understand, like, or are interested in someone or something. So, more audience participation now. With these definitions, I would love to see, by a show of hands, who here feels no connection to their hometown? Okay, no one, right. Who here feels somewhat of a connection to their hometown? Okay, a couple of hands, cool. A good connection to their hometown. Biggest crowd yet. And finally, a strongest connection, really strong connection to your hometown. You're allowed to put your hand up twice. Okay, great. Lots of people there. So this is interesting. Definitely a lot more people in the room, I'd say, who feel connected. In my survey respondents, I saw that 2% would say they feel no connection, which I think's, surprising, but okay. 40% felt somewhat of a connection, 30% a good connection, and 28% a strong connection, with 57% of people saying that that connection have been enabled by access to the internet. Now, when I looked at it for the local area specifically, we saw that 50% felt somewhat of a connection, 23% a good connection, and 27% a strong connection. So a slight shift, I guess, in terms of the baseline level of connection people felt, with 59% saying that they felt the internet had had an impact in them feeling connected. Now, I didn't just ask people to tick a box in the survey, I did ask for some thoughts, and from those thoughts, there were 3 common trends in terms of what drove connection for people. Number 1, following town event, businesses or local community group on social media platforms such as Instagram and Facebook. Number 2, connecting with family and friends through FaceTime or again, social media platforms. And finally, number 3, having family or friends who still lived in the hometown. One of the other interesting things that came out of the survey and stuck with me is the depth of connection. And I really found interest in what one respondent said. I think the internet and social media have been essential in keeping connected to my hometown, especially in recent times with the pandemic. However, arguably it makes us less connected as we rely on forms of communication that don't deliver a deeper form of connection, such as WhatsApp and Instagram, instead of writing letters or making phone calls, which can sometimes lead to deeper conversations and connections. With that in mind, done with the stats for now, wanted to move on to some local stories. I want to tell you about Sue. Sue was born in Halifax and moved to Northampton at the age of 5 due to her father's work. Despite this, she still feels a really strong connection to Halifax, and interestingly, her parents, having spent the majority of their adult life trying to move away from Halifax, have recently returned there 53 years later. Sue has lived in West Essex for the past 26 years. She moved here from London prior to the birth of her first child for more affordability, as we've already touched on, as well as more space. She loves the area's proximity to London, as she considers herself a Londoner, as well as the forest nearby. She would say Chigwell and the surrounding area isn't her hometown, but it is her adopted hometown. During COVID, she said she saw a heightened sense of community, meeting with her neighbours on driveways for Clap for Heroes, and since then, taking part in VE and Jubilee parties. For her, she sees the internet having played a great role in terms of keeping her connected to people she might have otherwise lost connection with. So that's people who have moved away from the area or who she might have used to work with. She says being able to observe noobs in WhatsApp group offer a communication line, better than a Christmas card, if you will. I've always admired Sue ever since I've known her, as she is heavily integrated in the local community. She has been a Girl Guiding District Commissioner for over 20 years and is also a counsellor for a local school, Reading Valley High. It's from these voluntary roles that she has. She says she's driven the deepest form of connection with the community and her chosen hometown, especially enabling her to meet people she says otherwise she wouldn't have met. Her advice to anyone who would be looking to deepen connection with their local community would to be explore opportunities to join community groups with shared interests. And from speaking to her, I took away that shared interest is a driver of connection with hometowns. Now, her youngest daughter, or first daughter I should say, Ellie, has also followed in her mother's footsteps and recently moved back to the area as she expects her first child. She agrees with her mum that it is shared interest that drives connection, as she is finding from attending NCT classes, where she's meeting lots of new faces, as I'm sure you can relate to, lots of new faces, some of them completely new to the area, having just recently moved. And she says shared interest is something she sees as driving connection, but also the anticipated shared experiences she'll share with the people she meets there. Which brings me to my friend Joe. Joe grew up in the local area, but has since moved to North London. When I asked him on the topic, he said he felt somewhat connected to the local area, mainly through his love of the forest, the family who still live here, but the people who he'd shared experiences with growing up in the local area. Now, a lot of them don't live here now today, but he said it's the bonds that they developed from those shared experiences and the memories of them which keep them connected. When speaking about the internet, he said this was crucial in ensuring he stayed in contact when this group first moved away to university. So we've seen shared interest and shared experience can be drivers of connection to our hometown. But there's also communal interest. Sarush, who is here today and has greatly helped me in preparing for this talk, recently spoke to me on the topic. He said having grown up in the area, despite family living nearby, and despite having gone to school in Chigwell, he wouldn't have said he necessarily felt a strong connection to the area, something that recently changed when he joined forces with his neighbours to appeal the closure of a local library. He said it was this experience, meeting in person and connecting over the internet, which helped shift the dial for him. Recently, he has also found out that where he considers himself to live, in Chigwell, will actually be going through a boundary change from the council, where it will be reclassified as Debden, something which he's unsure on how to view. Which brings me to another point which impacts how we feel connected to our hometown. Familiarity. Sometimes when we see our hometown become more distant from what we remember it to be, it can drive more connection to that nostalgic feeling of what it used to be. On the other hand, sometimes as it gets harder and harder to recognise our image of a hometown, it can make us feel more distant. Which brings me finally back to Ellie. Ellie had another point I wanted to raise today, having actually done a dissertation on the impact growing up in a border town can have on your sense of identity to a place. Now, what she found, as a spoiler alert, having done her dissertation focused on the local area, given the West Essex and London boundary, that growing up in a border town can create a unique sense of identity and connection because of the sense of belonging to two different places. Now, I think we can agree, Chigwell is a border town. If you go on Wikipedia, it says a town and civil parish in Epping Forest, District of Essex, and part of the urban and metropolitan area of London. What this means is your council tax might be going to Essex County Council, but your transport might be being provided by TfL. And I'm sure I'm not the only one in the room who, depending on who's asking, will say I'm from London or say I'm from Essex. It's from growing up in an in-between place, such as Chigwell, she argued that we can feel a stronger sense of connection where we have that unique experience we can share with those who have also grown up here or also experienced living here for a long time. And with that in mind, I want to recap. So, we've seen connection driven by shared interest, shared experience, communal interest, as well as what I'm going to call the border's edge, as it were. But before we leave today, I want to focus on what connection means and leave you with some tips. Because as we've seen, connection can be about a place, but it can also be about the people. Often, the people. Connection can be fluid. It can strengthen and weaken over time, something that we've seen with Sue's parents moving back to a previous hometown over 53 years later. So, my tips. Utilising the internet. Ways you could drive connection. Number 1, embrace new possibilities. Been struggling to reach out to an old friend who you'd like to reconnect with, or been looking to organise a community event but don't know where to start? AI exists now. It could help you outline what would be the process for organising that event, or land the right tone or message that you want to reach out to that friend to. Number 2, join community groups. Facebook, Nextdoor, there are many more platforms and it is beyond marketplace, I promise you. Not just joining these groups, but actively engaging on them. Think about how you show up. If you've had a positive experience at a local business, is that something you could share? Other people might find it really valuable. And finally, number 3, set boundaries. As we know, too much time on the internet can have a negative impact on our mental health. Comparison is the thief of joy, and what we want to do is avoid unhealthy fixations. When approaching connecting with the internet, think about it with purpose and intention, and make sure when you're reaching out, you're considering, does this need to be done online or could it be done in person? 3 tips for connecting without the internet. Number 1, volunteer. Volunteering in the UK is at a historic low, with only 13% of people in the UK volunteering currently, down from 17% pre-pandemic. That's a difference of 1.6 million people. We've seen that volunteering can have a really beneficial impact on both our mental and physical health and drive deep connection, especially when focused around shared interest. Number 2, be the neighbour you'd like to live next to. And I appreciate this will mean different things for different people. But in my mind, that means offering to take the bins out if they're away on holiday, and offering just in general to keep an eye on their place, or as we saw with Sarush, joining forces for a cause that matters for all of you. When considering about how you could be that neighbour, think about if new people were joining your local community, reaching out, offering a chat, especially if they're older members of the community who we know are impacted by loneliness currently, with 1.4 million saying that they do feel really lonely in their day-to-day life. Age UK data shows that Chigwell itself is not a high-risk area, but the surrounding towns are, which I think we can all agree is something we would like to see something done about. Finally, number 3, show up, just as we will have done today. It's brilliant to see you here, and I think you can agree, connecting in person can add so much value. There are so many events happening in our local communities, if we look for them, and I challenge you, if you don't find the event that you want, make it happen, just as Amardeep has done today. Finally, if I could leave you with one thing, whether it's your hometown or your chosen hometown, it's how you build connections that benefit those around you and yourself, as well as where possible, your hometown, internet or not, that matter. Thank you so much.